Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming out to Startup Shell. If this is your first time here, welcome. My name is Chris Saluga. I'm one of the directors for Startup Shell. Hopefully you can come back to one of our other events this semester. For those of you who don't know what Startup Shell is, we're a student-run startup incubator and co-working space on campus. When we don't host events like this, people are here working 24/7 on their own companies, which is an awesome deal. Some of the Startup Shell news coming up on April 30th, we have our Demo Day. Demo Day is a chance for all Startup Shell companies to share what they've been doing on with the public. It's from 4 to 8, April 30th. So you can find out more information at startupshell.org/demo day. And please come out to that because that'd be an awesome time to get to know Startup Shell a lot more intimate. So tonight we have Austin, Ningwei, 2 Startup Shell members who will be talking to you about how to fly around the world for free. So enjoy.
Have the clicker?
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
All right, so good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. So we're really excited. We get this opportunity to share with you guys our passion for travel. So Austin and I, we actually met over this common interest in travel around winter of junior year. When we figured this out and we start trying different things that we can do with travel hacking. And here's some pictures, hold on. Scroll. All right. So here's some pictures that Austin and I took on some of our trips. Some of them we took together, and some of them we did it separately. So here's one in Tokyo, and one in Kyoto. I think that's the shrine. And here's one we went together to Kenya when we were in the safaris. And here's the Iceland trip that Austin took over spring break. So now I'll let Austin introduce himself and kind of talk about what he has done with travel.
Sure, so hi, I'm Austin. I'm a senior majoring in electrical engineering and physics. And these are some of the trips I've taken in the last 3 months to sort of experiment with some of the techniques that we're going to be talking about today. So on the left is a trip I took over winter break over East Asia and Australia. On the top right is a trip that Ningwei and I took to Kenya, passing through Amsterdam at the end of January. And at the bottom right is a trip we took to the Maldives at the end of February that passed through Doha and Amsterdam as well.
Sure. And for me, so I'm a senior. I'm majoring in finance, econ, and math. So here are 2 trips that I took using some of the methods we're going to talk about. The first one is a round the world trip I took in the summer. We went back to China for about a month to visit my family. But on the way back, I visited Ethiopia, Istanbul, London, and Toronto. And on the right, that's a trip I took during spring break to Cancun, Panama City, and St. Martin's Island. And both of these are done without any full fare flights. Cool. So here's an overview of what we're going to talk about today. So there's 4 big segments. I'll start off talking about credit cards and how they can be used and leveraged to do these methods that we're talking about, and how credit scores play into these strategies. And then we're going to talk about how to scale it. How do we make it so that we can continue to do this essentially forever? Then afterwards, Austin is going to talk about what are the best uses for these miles and how to take it further with some of his new ideas that he's playing with. So let's get started. All right, so first, talk about credit cards and credit scores. So before we go into it, Austin and I did a little quick estimate of a very simple trip to London for 1 week. As you can see, flights covers almost over half of the cost. And that's why we want to tackle flights as our top priority with travel hacking. So how do we do it? Oops, excuse me. So reducing flight costs. So there are 2 major methods that we can do it. And they kind of have to work with each other, right? So first was the frequent flyer programs. They're kind of the programs that the airlines create so that their customers will continue to come back and be loyal to them. So they award miles for how much they fly, and then they can redeem these miles for free flights later on. When we're looking at frequent flyer miles, there are 3 key things we want to look at to make sure they're the best ones we can find. Number 1 is the partner airlines. Usually one airline partners with multiple other airlines to form an alliance so that they can reach different cities rather than just the ones they fly to. So the more you have, the more destinations you can have with your miles. Next, the earning schemes. Some mileage programs use dollar earning, which means how much you pay, and a certain ratio of that becomes your miles. while others, you can pay a very cheap fare, but it's about how much you've flown physically to get your miles. So obviously, if you want to save on costs, it's the ones that based on distance that you are more interested in looking at. And lastly, redemption types. There are a lot of different redemption types with different programs. The two major ones are regional-based and cost-based. Regional-based and distance-based. We're going to talk about that later, but just keep in mind that's a big thing to look at when we're talking about frequent flyer programs. And on the other hand, we're going to look at credit cards, and that's what my main topic here is. They give you sign-up bonuses. A lot of banks, a lot of credit card issuers partner with airlines so that they could, gain both the credit card customers as well as keeping the airline customers loyal to that particular airline. And when we're looking at it, there are, again, three things to look at. Sign-up bonus. A good sign-up bonus is usually around 50,000 miles. As you can see in this, typical commercial that US Airways had a couple months ago. And spending requirements. Usually a car requires you to spend $1,000 to $5,000 within a certain amount of time to get these sign-up bonuses. And then lastly, annual fees. Okay, usually the high lucrative cars requires annual fees anywhere from like $65 to like $100 or maybe even $300, $400. You don't want to be stuck paying $400 for like a minimal amount of miles because that's not what you want to do. So again, those two have to work together and want to keep in mind those criteria when we're selecting which one we want. And just raise up your hand. How many of you guys have at least one credit card in here? Cool. How about more than two? 5? We got a couple. All right, cool. So between Austin and I, we actually own about 30 credit cards as of now. So, and here's kind of our disclaimer, right? Like, it's not really something that's like very convenient. It's something you gotta be very disciplined about. You can't just be spending money on your credit cards, keeping balances, not paying your payments on time. It takes a lot of discipline and responsibility to do what we're doing here. It's not something you can say, just I'll pick up one day and I'll say, I'll forget about it. And then you'll be racking up a lot of interest fees as well as the annual fees. So that's kind of like our warning. So make sure if you're gonna do this, gotta be responsible on what you're doing. Cool. But on the other hand, I want to kind of like debunk some myth about credit cards. Because I've also heard from a lot of friends of mine, they're kind of like scared of credit cards, right? Like a lot of like my parents, like my elders told me, don't get a credit card in college because you're not gonna be able to control it and you're gonna ruin your entire life from that point on. That's really not true. And I listed the 3 top myths about credit cards here. So first, don't get a credit card. Just use prepaid or debit cards. So when I was really doing research for this page, the author of this page said, that's like saying drinking 1 beer is gonna make you incredibly sick, which is not true, right? You can use credit cards for your everyday purchases as long as you're responsible for them. And in the long run, they're gonna help you getting that credit score and getting that mortgage in the future. And next, carry a balance your credit card helps your score. Again, this is completely untrue. Credit companies do not care about how much balance you carry on a credit card, except for the fact that they profit off of them because they can earn interest on them. So the more you carry, the more you're at risk for paying those interest fees. And lastly, which is most importantly, only have 1 credit card. A lot of people are saying, why have more, right? 1's enough for you to do everything you need, which is not true. The more credit card you have is actually going to help your credit score, as we'll discuss later. Because the more credit cards you have, the more credit limit you have, which means companies are more likely to believe you're a responsible individual, which means they're going to lend you more money. So, all right, so here we go. Here are some of the top factors for credit scores. And I rank them from high impact, medium impact, and low impact. So let's talk about it. Credit card utilization. As I just mentioned earlier, the more credit limit you have, the more room you have to play with, right? If you're utilizing credit cards like 100%, leveraging every single credit that the bank is willing to lend to you, what do you think the bank's going to think? They're going to think you're a very risky individual who's not going to pay you back. So keeping your credit card utilization low is going to help your credit score tremendously. And next, payment history. Now, this is probably the most important one. The fact that you pay on time means the banks can get its money back, right? Which means you're a trustworthy individual. By doing that, your credit score is going to keep consistent. But if you miss one, that's where the drop comes from. So being responsible really comes right here, being payment history. And here's another few ones you can look at. Age of credit history. For us, it's going to be kind of tough because we're mostly like 20s The most we're gonna have is like what, 4 years, 5 years of credit history, which is low by usual standards in the credit card world. And credit inquiry, so you don't want to apply for too many credit cards at once. And we're gonna discuss how to kind of like get around that and what's the strategy about that later. And same thing with total accounts. As you get older, the more accounts you have, it means you're more responsible and you're more likely to get a credit card. So here's a few advice we have for beginners who want to get into this credit card business, right? Number one, be on time. Make that payment, right? The payment history is literally the most important factor in determining your credit score. So be on time, and one can really, really hurt you. Next, always pay in full. We're all college kids. None of us really that rich yet. So you don't want to be paying that interest fees because that's what's going to hurt you in the long run. You're chasing a few miles, but you ended up paying hundreds of dollars for it. And lastly, build history. At first, you're going to look at all these credit cards, right? 50,000 sign-up points, 100,000. You're going to be like, wow, that's great, right? But you're not going to get them because you don't really have any history. So we recommend you like applying for the cards that are no annual fees, that are easy to get, that are targeted for students to build up your history. And once you have that total accounts, once you have that time, then you can start looking at these lucrative cards for your next travel. Great. Any questions so far? Good. Cool. So our next topic, how do we scale? How do we scale this so that we can make this into a large operation where we can actually use these miles for a lot of different things? There's some problems with scaling, right? As I was talking about before, if you have too many inquiries, your credit score is going to go down. And we want to avoid that. We want to make sure we're not damaging your credit score by doing this. And next, high amount of minimum spending. As I was saying, if you want to achieve a certain amount of miles as a sign-up bonus, you have to achieve you have to spend like $1,000 to $5,000 within a certain amount of period, and those sometimes could be tough. And we'll also discuss some strategies on how to navigate that. And lastly, keeping track of cards, and that's probably again resonating with the responsibility part. Because some cards have annual fees, so keep track of when that is coming up, so you know to either cancel, ask for some sort of reimbursement for the annual fee, or keep it and pay, and making sure you know which one you're paying. All right. I'm going to go mostly into 1 and 2 because 3, that's mostly just about responsibility, and I don't want to stress on that too much. So how do we make sure we apply credit cards and at the same time not hurting our scores too much? There's a strategy called the 90-day cycle. So an inquiry goes on your account that's only relevant for banks to look at for 180 days. So say if I apply a credit card today, that's going to stay on there until 6 months from now. Then banks are now no longer going to be looking at it. So 90-day cycle is to maximize your applications without damaging your credit score that much. So say I apply 2 to 3 credit cards as like an average churner on the first, say November 1st, right? If you wait 90 days, you're only going to have 1 inquiry on your account. Then when you apply in January 31st, you're still only going to, you're going to have 1 inquiry. Say you have 1 inquiry in the beginning, right? Then when you apply on November 1st, you're going to have 1. Then once you reach 31st, that first inquiry that you're talking about from 6 months ago is going to go off your record. And then once you reach May and apply again on May 2nd, the second inquiry you made 6 months ago is going to go off your record again. So every time you apply, you only have 1 inquiry in your account. And you want to apply sometimes multiple cards to take advantage of that, although it's not necessary at all times. And we could come back to that. Yes?
So you apply for multiple on the first, and they only pull 1 inquiry as opposed to multiple inquiries?
Right.
It depends on the bank. So like Chase consolidates your inquiries, but some other banks like Citi don't. Essentially what he's getting at here is you want only 1 set of inquiries to be on your 6-month record at once. And if you have like a 90-day cycle, that's pretty much what you do.
Okay.
Yes.
How does an inquiry relate to an application?
Sure. So every time we apply for a credit card. Oh yeah. So the question is, actually, could you repeat again? I'm sorry. I want to make sure I get it right.
What is the relationship between an inquiry and an application?
Sure. So the question is, what is the relationship between an inquiry and an application, right? So every time you apply online, fill out one of those forms and it says, please wait, we're getting your decision right now, that's an inquiry. A bank is pulling from one of the credit reporting agencies what your credit score or what your credit score is, essentially for now. And that's inquiry. It's called a hard pull if you want to use some of the terminologies. So that's going to stay on your record for essentially the 6 months. Make sense? Cool. So next, we're going to talk about minimum spending requirements. So it might be a little hard to see, but as you can see, the parts that are circled, you can earn 30,000 bonus miles. Great. And it says after you spend $1,000 for the first 3 months, right? People are going to be like, wow, that's $1,000. That's a lot. But you got to think about different ways, right? Because there's a lot of different ways where you can spend those $1,000 that you don't even think of, that you already spent. And we'll go into that in the next slide. But so why is this important? Because you have requirement ranges that's from 1,000 to 5,000, 3 to 6 months. So even though the offer might be really good in terms of miles, you want to make sure you can handle the spending requirements and not waste the opportunity for the sign-up bonus, because you can't get it again, right? If you get this one card and you miss the deadline, you would essentially have to apply again to get the bonus opportunity. So we don't want to miss that. I want to make sure we are getting the right cards for the right situation. And if you want to look at it, if I'm applying for 3 cards at once on an average of $2,500 spend, that's $7,500 in 3 months. It could be tough. It could be very tough. So that's why I want to be going forward with a little caution. And now we'll go forward, like, how do we spend it, right? There's a lot of strategies. Some is very straightforward, others not so much, which is kind of like a way around the problem, right? So some things you don't think of when you're thinking about the $1,000, $3,000 spending requirements. Say rent. If you guys are living in like commons, courtyards, you have the option to pay in credit cards, right? That's like $700, $800 right off the bat per month. And if you think about it, 3 months, that's like $2,400, $2,500. And if you spend on something else, that's like $3K. Yeah.
Just to be clear, we have to pay an additional percent if we use a credit card to pay for it.
Yes.
Not
But
with Amazon payments, right?
No,
we're gonna talk about it in a little
go.
bit. But yes, there's no with that amount of payments. Yes. Can you pay tuition on credit? I think they actually stopped that recently. I remember receiving an email about that.
You can, it's just a percentage.
Okay, like percent. But if you're earning like 50,000 miles, like paying extra $15 for them, I think it's worth it, but it's up to you guys. But anyway, or if you're traveling with a group of friends, right, you can book for them. That's like a couple $1,000s if you go on a trip. Or large purchases for families, right? If you're buying like a fridge, maybe like, Mom, let me use my credit card on this. There you go. So on the right side here, those are a little bit more advanced strategies that Austin and I both have used. This is called the manufacturer spending. So essentially, we're not actually spending on any real products. So for example, Amazon payments. This was something we utilized quite often when we first started. So Amazon allows you to transfer payments from account to account at a limit of $1,000 per month. And all you have to do is just type in your credit card number, pay Austin, and boom, the money's to Austin's account. And he could take it out to his bank account. And if we do it kind of like reverse or do like a triangle, like first person, second person, third person to first person, that's $1,000 per month right there.
It's 3,000.
Well, 1,000 per person, 3,000 total. And it's so simple, right? You don't even have to leave your bedroom. And the 2 below, it's called Serve and Bluebird. There are 2 prepaid cards that develop an Amex that you can reload gift cards on. Now, because of the timing constraint, we're not going to too much because it's a little bit more complicated, but I encourage you guys to read about it if you have the time. Awesome. So let's put this into perspective, right? So let's say an average churner does 3 cards per cycle, per 90-day cycle, and he does it 4 times a year. And an average of 30,000 miles per card, that's like 270,000 miles. At my trip during spring break, that was only 35,000 miles. Just imagine how many trips you could do with this. It's very powerful. You could do a lot of things with it. And that's where I'm gonna let Austin explain what are some of the best uses for miles.
All right, thanks, Ningwei. So let's say you have all of these miles. What can you do with them? Well, like Ningwei mentioned, there are 2 main classes of programs that you can redeem them on. And the first type are called region-based programs, where the pricing of your flight in miles depends on the region that you're flying from and the region that you're flying to. Now, these regions can be as large as North America or as small as Japan. And the second type are distance-based programs, where they implement a tiered sort of pricing based on the distance of the flight that you're actually taking. And these are some of our favorite programs that we use pretty often to redeem miles. But for this presentation, we're going to focus on United. And we like United because a number of credit cards all transfer their miles directly to United. So it's very easy to rack up a lot of United miles. And in addition, you can redeem on any of the 27 Star Alliance airlines that fly around the world. And also, United has one of the best sort of flight award search and booking interfaces out there. So because of this, United is sort of the perfect gateway into this world of mileage awards. All right, so I'm going to be explaining this section by iterating through a set of examples. And these examples, like I said, start out pretty simple, but they're going to grow in complexity pretty quickly. So feel free to stop me at any time and ask questions. All right, let's jump right in. So here we have a simple round trip, starting in DC, flying to London Heathrow. So on United, this is going to cost, and I'm going to draw your attention to the right side. It says 60,000 miles and $192. Now, since United is a region-based program, it's going to cost 60,000 miles no matter where you fly from in the States and where you fly to in Europe. Now, the number on the right is represents the airport taxes and fees that you're going to be paying for this award ticket. And that's something you can't really get around with a couple of exceptions, no matter what. And it's completely dependent on the airports you're flying into and out of. Now, these taxes and fees can range anywhere from $10 on the low end for domestic flights to a high of pretty much $198. That's the highest I've seen it. This is where most people stop with redemptions, but this is the worst value that you can get out of with your miles. Now, before we continue, I'm going to define a couple terms. An open jaw is when you fly into one city but depart from another city. And a stopover is essentially another stop on your trip. And actually, the United program allows one stopover and two open jaws on any round trip award ticket. Now, these rules vary from airline to airline, but for the general part, they're relatively similar. All right, let's throw in an open jaw. So this flight goes from DC to London Heathrow, and then open jaw to Paris, flying back from Paris to DC. So this again costs 60,000 miles, and this time the airport taxes and fees are $82. Now let's make that open jaw into a stopover. So DC to London, flying from London to Paris, and then flying from Paris back to DC. So as you might expect, again, this is $60,000 with some nominal amount in airport taxes and fees. Now, as you might notice from the map, the actual routing in practice is slightly different because the system is going to throw some layovers in there depending on dates and times that you're traveling. Now, in this case, there's a layover in Oslo and a layover in Frankfurt. And we can actually take advantage of those layovers, as I'll be covering in a little bit. But for now, let's throw in a stopover and an open jaw. So you're going from DC to London, stopover in London for as long as you want. It could be 2 days, or it could be a month long, or 2 months long. And then from there, you fly to Paris, where you open jaw to Madrid and fly back to DC from there. Now, all of this still counts as a round trip flight from the US to Europe on United. As you can see, it still costs 60,000 miles and $149 in airport taxes and fees. And again, there are a couple layovers flown in from the actual specific routing that you're taking. Now, but United allows 2 open jaws in a start over with 1 catch. The open jaw can't be at the same stop as a stopover. So the only other place it can be is on the return to the destination. So here we have a United flight, hypothetical, with 2 open jaws and 1 stopover. So flying out of DC to London for a stopover, as long as you want, then flying to Paris, open jaw to Madrid, back for your second open jaw to Seattle. Now, again, this is going to cost $60,000 and some amount in airport taxes and fees. And this is sort of your basic full-fledged United round trip ticket. But how can we push this farther? So first, I'm going to define a layover. So officially, a layover is any flight that has a connection time of less than 24 hours. So normally, when we book flights, we look for itineraries with the shortest layover possible for obvious reasons. Layovers are tiring, they're inconvenient, and they're basically wasted time. But if you go to the other end of the spectrum, What if you booked a 23-hour layover? Then you would have time to get out of the airport, explore the city, grab a couple meals, book a hotel, rest up, wake up the next morning in time to catch your next flight. Now, the specific rules for booking layovers vary from airline to airline, and often they're pretty murky, but for the most part, you can get away with 2, 3, 4, even 5 or 6 long layovers on any itinerary that you're trying to book. So enough with theoretical exercises. Let's look at an actual flight. So this is the flight I took in January for winter break. Now I'm going to be going through this in the context of the terms that we've just defined. So, and this was the first sort of exercise I did with extended layovers. So the origin was Osaka. From there, I flew for an 8-hour layover in Shanghai, where I was able to get out of the airport and sort of grab some food and explore the city. The destination was in Melbourne, where I open-jawed over land to Sydney. From there, I flew to Seoul for my stopover of 2 days, finally ending in Sapporo, going through Nagoya Airport. The total cost of this was 45,000 miles, which is equivalent to $450 in cash. There's pocket change compared to the $1,000 or $2,000 you'd be paying for this itinerary if you booked it normally, just with cash. All right, so next I'm going to define another term, and this is a positioning flight. And essentially a positioning flight is a flight that you take to catch another flight. And this sounds counterintuitive, but there are a number of situations where this can come in extremely useful. Namely, if you find a really good deal that leaves from a different airport, or if you want to position yourself for a really good redemption, both of which I'll be covering shortly. So this is another flight that I booked. I didn't end up actually flying this one. I canceled it and refunded it for other reasons, but it's a good example nonetheless, so let's work through it. So I had been searching for flights to Japan because I knew I wanted to go to Japan over winter break. When I found this deal on Delta, and it's kind of hard to see right there, but that says 785 Canadian dollars, which is somewhat less, somewhere over $700 US. So this is a really good deal. It's about half of what you would expect to pay for a flight to Japan, with only one catch. It left from Toronto. So instead of closing the browser window and continuing to search up flights from DC, I booked this flight, and then I booked a short haul flight on a distance-based program, in this case British Airways, for 4,500 miles, essentially pocket change. That let me take advantage of this deal to get to Japan for half as much as I would be paying normal. Now, is it possible to take this even further? So when I was thinking about this, I realized that there are two main factors that prevent most people from traveling. The first one is money, and the second one is time. Now, if we take care of the money aspect with miles, what if we sort of remove the time aspect as well? So what I was getting at is trying to extend your trip by chaining multiple awards together. As in, what if you could use the final leg of a previous award as a positioning flight for the first leg of your next award? And this is sort of what I had in mind when I booked my round the world trip for the summer. So I had two flights specifically in mind. The first one sort of takes advantage, sort of tries to push the boundaries of the region-based nature of the United program, essentially seeing how can I get from one remote corner of one region to another remote and accessible corner of another region. And the two cities I ended up picking for this were Santorini in the Greek Isles and the Seychelles Islands off East Africa, both of which only one full-service airline in Starlines flies to. And the second flight that I had been looking at takes advantage of extremely good prices on American Airlines in business class between the Middle East and Southeast Asia. And don't worry about remembering all these details, just know that there are some extremely good deals out there that are completely inaccessible until you position yourself in the right location for them. All right, so this is the itinerary that I came up with. Now, this is one of the most complex itineraries I've ever dealt with, and I'm gonna be talking through it pretty quickly. So the two things I want you to take away from this are, one, what to look for when structuring an itinerary beyond just the initial price tag. And two, why miles are so much more valuable than dollars. All right, let's begin. So this itinerary is booked into 3 arcs. The first 2 are booked on United, using United miles, and the third one is booked using American Airlines miles. All right, and I'm going to be talking through these in the context of terms that we defined to try to give a better idea of the structure of a flight itinerary in general. So the first arc, this goes from the US to South America to Europe. So the origin is DC, the first layover, 17 hours in Cancun. From there, I fly to my destination in Montevideo, or Uruguay, where I began my first open jaw to Rio in Brazil. The next stop is my stopover in Lisbon, from which I take a positioning flight to Eastern Europe with a day to explore Brussels. That ticket cost 77,500 miles and $100 in fees. The next flight, no, the next itinerary, the next arc. This is the first of the 2 flights that I had denying. So starting in Santorini, first I fly to Athens for 12 hours to explore the city before taking another flight to Addis Ababa with enough time to sort of rest and grab a couple meals. From there, I reached my destination in the Seychelles Islands. And from there, I knew that I wanted to position myself in Dubai to take advantage of the second flight that I had been looking at. But I still had a stopover enough to use, so I placed that in Istanbul. This flight cost 60,000 miles and $121. So onto the third arc. Now this arc was booked on American Airlines. American Airlines has sort of slightly different rules than United does, but for the most part, the structure of the itineraries are the same. So starting in Dubai, first I fly business class to Bangkok by way of Amman, Jordan for 17 hours. From there, I open jaw to Singapore. Before flying to Wellington, New Zealand with a day to explore Brisbane courtesy of the second layover. And then I open jaw again to Auckland, New Zealand before flying finally back to DC with a day to rest in Los Angeles. This itinerary cost 92,500 miles and $123. So adding everything up, 230,000 miles split between 2 United awards and 1 American award, plus $345 in airport taxes and fees. However, this talk is called How to Fly Around the World for Free, not How to Fly Around the World for $345. So I picked up another cashback card that gave a $400 travel credit as a bonus, bringing the total for this flight down to 0. Thank you for coming. I hope
All right, questions? Yes, Rob.
How do you do the open jobs?
you just book them. So like when you're booking itineraries, on the menu, there's usually an option. There's always an option for multiple destinations.
Not other books, but like, how do you get from
Oh, I over land, or you just book a cheap short haul flight.
Like a low-cost airline,
Yeah.
usually? Yep.
Is there any limit how long it would job to be?
No, usually no. So actually, you get into situations where if you just want a round trip and you don't have enough time for, actually, that's for a stopover. Oh, actually, yeah, no, that it's relevant. So if you just have time for a single round trip and you don't have a use for the third leg of a flight, you can actually get a free one-way. So for example, if I only had time for a week in London and I wanted to come straight back, I can actually book my open jaw, technically speaking, to LA if I wanted to visit family in LA or something for like 3 months later and just have a one-way flight for free.
Just to address the question a little bit better, I guess in additional. So Austin's good.
See how it is.
You're talking more, so I get a little credit. All right. So with open jaws, yeah. So he was saying, yeah, you could do it on either side. You just gotta make sure the open jaw is within the same region that you're coming from. So you can't be like from DC
Oh yeah, that's
to
good.
like Europe and go to South America. That wouldn't work.
With the exception of the return flight open jaws. So
Right.
like
Unless you're going to another, yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Yep.
Do you guys have any advice for packing?
For packing, pack as light as possible. If you're not sure if you're gonna need it or not, you don't need it.
Yeah, he just uses my stuff. It's really annoying actually.
What's your like go-to blog or what's
Okay.
your, like, yeah, do you have like a go-to
Yeah.
blog or do you use multiple?
So we use a lot of blogs. We're gonna be posting a couple links on the Facebook page after this, but a couple good ones that we frequent are one is called The Points Guy, and another is called Travel is Free. Again, we'll be posting links.
What's
Yeah.
the second one?
Travel is free.
Travel is
Yeah, we actually met the guys.
Yeah, we met the guy on a trip
free.
actually.
And then points guy.
Yeah,
Oh, really?
that's awesome.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
Travel is free is kind of like the blog that kind of got me started and everything. Yep, cool. Yes.
So with the credit cards that have the annual fees, you guys cancel them after you get the reward points, or how do you handle that?
Right. That's a very good question. So that's actually a lot of debates on them. It's like a very big topic. That's a talk on its own, right? But most of the cards we are looking at usually waive your first year annual fee. So once that second year hits, if you think it's worth it, right? You kind of got to do a little inventory. If you think it's worth it, you actually keep using this card. Then you want to weigh the the benefit and the cost of whether you should pay that $100 or not. But if you don't want to, right, you can either cancel it, which will kind of hurt your credit score because your credit, your total credit limit is going to decrease and your credit utilization is going to go down, or go up, right? Because your percentages can go up. So you kind of got to weigh. There's some options like you could downgrade it to a non-annual fee card. A lot of banks have that, where say a card like Chase Sapphire Preferred, they have the Chase Sapphire version, which doesn't have any annual fees. And once that year comes around, you can call, can we downgrade my card to the no annual fee version? That's one option. Another option to keep that credit card limit open is you cancel the card, but move those credit card limit to another card with the same bank. So maybe I have Chase Sapphire Preferred and I also have another Chase card. I say, I want that $5,000 to move from my Chase Sapphire Preferred to the other card. You won't lose any credit limit because of that, but you won't lose the total account of number of accounts and also the age of history. So it's a little bit better, but at least you're getting something out of it.
Sorry. How far in advance do you recommend booking?
That's a good question. So it really depends. Most people recommend like 6 months in advance for miles flights because they usually have limited space for those. Sometimes if there's space left over, they'll release, because they release them gradually. They release them every 2 to 3 months. And sometimes they might release like seats right before, like a week before, so you might get lucky and be able to catch a flight out immediately. But for the most part, as early as possible.
Right. So preparation will be the key for trips like these. Yes.
Yeah, sorry, I actually, before I forget. So, so you know how you said spend $1,000 in 3 months?
Mhm.
What if you spend $1,000 in the first month? Do they?
Yeah, it counts. You get it
You
immediately.
get it as soon as you
Yep.
spend the.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, I guess when the statement
When the statement
closes.
hits.
Yep, when the statement closes. Yes.
Sir, have you ever done these with non-carry-on baggage, these trips?
Yeah, so like a lot of the airline cards you get are actually come with perks, like the first 2 check bags free. And usually on international flights, they allow at least 1 check bag free. As for me, I usually travel carry-on. Mackenzie?
What are prices?
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's a good question. So a couple of the trips that we booked this year have been price mistakes, and these are usually just extremely impossibly good deals that pop up from time to time that you have to book literally immediately, like within minutes of seeing it. And they're usually very difficult to catch. And there are a couple good sites that we follow to try to keep track of these. We'll be posting the links on the Facebook page as well, but one of the best ones is called the Flight Deal.
What?
The Flight Deal.
Like you?
The Flight Deal. Yeah, they post daily deals, and whenever there's a price mistake, they're usually one of the first people to hear about it.
Yeah. And you still gotta get really lucky, right? Because
Yeah.
like dates might not match up. You might miss it by like a few minutes. Sometimes airlines don't honor it, which is probably, let's say, 20% of the time, 10% of the time.
Yeah.
Like the one with United recently where they offered $50 round trip in first class from London to DC. They're not gonna honor
They didn't
that.
honor that one,
Yeah.
but
But a lot of them, they
for
do
example,
honor.
our flight to Kenya in the end of January, that one was 3 legs through Amsterdam and then ending in Nairobi. The fare for that was $50 with about $149 in fees. So that's pretty cool. Yeah.
So there are many water miles that tend to expire after a certain period of time.
Right. So usually it's like a year after your last use, and there's a number of ways to get around that. So you can spend miles on trivial things too, like this is actually how they want you to spend miles on gift cards or like trinkets that no one needs. So like a tactic that I've used before I started like gaining a lot of miles is to book like maybe like a 6-month or 1-year magazine subscription for something trivial like 500 miles. But essentially, as long as you keep earning miles, they're never going to expire.
It wouldn't be like the biggest problem you will have,
Yeah.
because if you keep transferring mile into your account, that counts as an activity. So
Yeah.
that'll keep it rolling.
I don't know if it's on the spot, but.
Can you talk a bit louder?
Yeah.
I don't think you guys have spot, but there is a cost certain in the credit card fees and the time you spend figuring all this out. Do you have like an idea of what that might be, in terms of hours and fees?
Could you just repeat that? I guess I'm not understanding the core of the question there.
So there's credit card fees, which is a percentage of the transaction that you've done.
Sure. Yeah.
Then there's all the time you spend, figuring this out.
Uh-huh.
Do you know how much, like, that would be for the candy effect or something like that?
Credit card fees?
You say like how long does it take you to try to plan this? Like,
Oh, to plan it.
Planet.
Well, this is pretty much a hobby of ours, so we're constantly reading about this.
Yeah.
That's
We don't
what-
have lives. So.
Can you tell everyone where you've been for like the past, what your weekends were the past 5 weekends?
Okay, so in the month of March, I was here about 6 days. In the beginning of March, Ningwei and I went to Doha, Maldives, and Amsterdam over 1 week, over about a week over one weekend. And then I went to Austin, Texas, Boulder, Colorado. Spring break was in Iceland. Ningwei's spring break was in various spots in the Caribbean. After that, last week, actually, we were in Santiago de Chile. So that was pretty fun. But yeah.
We do travel a lot. Yep.
Yeah, how do you guys get around visa requirements for some of the countries that you went to?
Okay, so
Visa
the
requirements?
the question is how do you get around like visa requirements? That's actually kind of a relevant question for me because
Yeah.
I actually don't carry a U.S. passport, so it actually it gets annoying. But for like Austin, as like a U.S. passport holder, literally like every one of the countries we've been to,
Yeah, I
like,
haven't,
does not
I haven't
require
needed a visa for anything.
or has a visa on arrival. I mean, just for me, I just do them in advance. I do my research. I think it's kind of fun to like see what each country's requirements are. Kind of figuring things out. But that's just me. You take you probably do it like 3 weeks beforehand.
You
4
can't
weeks
get
beforehand.
around visa requirements. You just have to do it.
Sorry, go ahead.
What do you do with the other costs of traveling down, like hotels and?
Right. So essentially,
Repeat the question real quick, Austin.
What?
Repeat the question.
Oh, okay. So the question was, what do you do to keep the other costs of travel down, like hotels, etc.? So actually, there's 2 ways. One is through hotel cards. So frequent flyer cards aren't the only cards that are out there. There's also hotel cards that give you hotel points that you can spend. So actually, last weekend we were in Santiago de Chile, and we spent the weekend in the Grand Hyatt Santiago for free using hotel points. So that's one way. Another way is to just stay in hostels, and hostels kind of get a bad rep in the United States because we have pretty crappy hostels. But literally everywhere else I've been in the world has extremely nice hostels that are like maybe $15 or $20.
Surfing, yeah. I think Austin did some couch surfing. Did you want to
Oh yeah,
talk about
I've done couch surfing too. Yeah, a lot of options. Airbnb. We stayed in the Maldives for $15 a night in
Oh,
on
that's true,
Airbnb,
that's
so
true,
that was
yeah.
awesome.
You guys do you have experience with like the more dubious ways of travel, having like hidden city ticketing, something like that?
Oh yeah, so I know about them. There was that famous case with I don't remember what the site was called, but
Skip
some kid,
Lag, I
yeah,
think.
skip lag, yeah,
that kid,
that
yeah.
kid's. So essentially, okay, so the question was about hidden city ticketing, which essentially is it has to do with manipulating, taking advantage of pricing on different routes, different flight routes. So sometimes a flight directly to the city that you're trying to go will cost more than a flight to some other city that passes through your city as a layover. So the technique is to just get off at that city.
Because seeing airlines, right? I interviewed for airlines actually. But when airlines price tickets, right, they think people are less inclined to do a ticket that's a stop or a layover, right? That's why they price them a little lower versus a nonstop flight. And that's kind of like the strategy the skip lag is kind of like trying to exploit, because there might be flight tickets where going through a certain city, that's the airline's hub, might actually be cheaper than flying directly into that hub. That's kind of like the strategy he's going with. He created an algorithm for it, which is.
So yeah, we've never done hidden city ticketing because we fly a lot, and there have been rumors of people getting like miles revoked and stuff like that, depending on the stuff that they've been doing. So yeah, we know. Yeah. If you.
It's not really worth it.
Yep.
How many credit cards do you have?
So about between the two of us, about 30.
About 30, maybe 29, I want to say, 28. Cool. Good? All right.
Any other questions?
Thanks a lot for coming, guys.
Thank you, Austin. Thank you, Ningwei, for coming out. Guys, have a good night. Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, that was awesome.
Thanks.